I'm not a risk-taker by nature, but slap-up visions of horrors untold tend to pull at the fraying edges of my curiosity. Listening to hushed whisperings about Hallows Haven, the local abandoned asylum, had tweaked that curiosity a notch too high, and despite the skin-crawling unease it made me feel, I had decided to step into the mouth of this dilapidated beast. Locals frowned upon and chided, but the thrill-seeker in me, the paranormal enthusiast, couldn't resist the alluring pull of despair, history, and potential intrigue nestled within those broken walls. Hallows Haven was no ordinary asylum. The asylum, sunk deep into woebegone disrepair, reeked of tragic narratives that ran thicker than the moss carpeting its walls. It was not just the unsettling whispers, the innumerable sightings, or the shadowy unease that hung like a pall over it, but the tales of abuse, illegal experiments, and deaths that were tucked inconspicuously into its past that held my undivided attention. Among numerous anecdotes that cropped up in hushed conversations was the tale of the demented painter, a schizophrenic artist who'd left a brush-stroked path of dread in his wake. The more I unearthed, the more I felt drawn towards the maelstrom of his eerie legacy. As I found myself on the outskirts of the asylum, I was apprehensive with the unsettling quietness of the vast building sinking its icy fingers into my courage. It was silent, but not a comforting, pardoning silence. I was being watched, judged, weighed, and found unworthy. With every floorboard producing an echoing creak, goosebumps prickled my skin, and doubts about this reckless venture began to invade my thoughts. Amid the darkness, however, I discovered the art therapy room clutching onto a tangible residue of dread. Disturbing paintings, presumably the works of the infamous demented painter, challenged reality and perpetuated madness, screaming louder than words could convey. Darkness fell unceremoniously, snatching away what remained of my flawed courage. The flashlight flickered and then died. I felt a chill travel up my spine, a nefarious fear setting in, announcing its arrival with whispers heard out of nowhere, screams echoing from long ago. Shadows began to move, and I could see ghastly figures inhabiting the corners of my vision. I could sense blood-soaked histories come alive, painting an imagery too vivid, too real. In this brutal, ghostly carnival, the specter of the demented painter emerged the victor, his eyes burning holes into my psyche. As fear wrapped its bone-chilling arms around me, I felt an urgent, mad desire to escape. My hands, in the suffocating dark, found a hidden staircase. I descended into a cache filled with disquieting artifacts and grim collectibles from the inmates' lifetimes. Further afoot lingered an absolute abyss, where formless apparitions grasped at my sanity, driving me to the edge. Desperate, terror-hardened gasps as I dashed out through the main doors, where freedom lay just beyond. Emotionally splayed, my strength fled me as the looming shadows finally claimed my consciousness. I woke up several hours later, surrounded by concerned faces of local residents who had found me unconscious by the asylum gates, with no sign of the camera I'd ventured in with. After that night, not a soul from town would dare to step foot in Hallows Haven. The dread-soaked tale of the Hallows Haven Asylum remains unresolved, its growing notoriety veiling its haunting past. I returned, but haunted by memories that send shivers rushing down my spine and ghosts that whisper me awake at night. I urge you, my readers, to respect the tragic beings who've endured life's agony therein. Do not take lightly the deep scars such haunts can inflict on the bravest souls. For the horrors beyond their doors are far graver than the stories they inspire.
I've always had an unexplainable affinity towards the abandoned remains of the past. The haunting allure of decrepit structures and their eerie narratives captivated me. A thrill ran down my spine when I stumbled upon an old blog post discussing a forgotten asylum tucked away in a remote forest. The grainy photographs and sinister tales piqued my curiosity, luring me towards the unwelcoming vestige. With directions secured and excitement brimming, I set out to discover the asylum. Seeing only tall, menacing trees and listening to the unsettling rustle of leaves, I trekked through the dense forest. The asylum loomed into view with a ghastly elegance as dusk laid a menacing blanket over the scene, rousing a chill that swept down my spine. I stood before its towering arches, its cracked facade revealing decades of decay. The broken windows looked like empty eye sockets, as the light of the dying day cast eerie shadows, adding to its repugnant demeanor. Clambering through a shattered window, I stepped into the decaying interior. Faint echoes of forgotten madness veiled in spine-chilling silence threatened to shatter the precarious calm. Dusty spiderwebs shrouded the deserted corridors, testament to the years of solitude. Discarded medical paraphernalia, rotted furniture, and strewn patient files littered the premises, hinting at the residual sorrow entrapped within its age-withered walls. A sense of dread swirled around me, a product of my overactive imagination, I vainly tried to convince myself. Venturing deeper into the labyrinth of desolation, a locked basement door gnawed at my curiosity. After a few futile attempts, the rusty hinges creaked, allowing the reluctant door to heave open. A chilling draft blew past, sending cold shivers down my spine as I descended into what felt like a pit of lost horrors. Stumbling upon an old journal among a clutter of obsolete tools, I started reading. It narrated grotesque stories of deplorable patient maltreatments, experimental procedures bordering on torture, etched in an important patient's record. The disturbing monochrome sketches sent a wave of revulsion rolling through me. A resonating chill grasped the air as I felt an unnerving alteration in my surroundings. Whispers danced around the cryptic silence, barely discernible yet persistent. I caught glimpses of fleeting shadows from the corners of my eyes. Objects quivered and jostled as if unseen hands guided them. When I decided to withdraw, a violent storm lashed outside, the heavy rainfall snuffing out the thin chance of an escape. The unforgiving walls closed in, making me feel trapped in the ghastly fortress. I sought sanctuary within the doomed asylum, never realizing an invisible terror trailed my footprints. Finding temporary respite, I huddled in a corner, trying to ignore the cacophony of phantom screams piercing the silence. Invisible hands reached out, tugging at my clothes, dragging me into deeper darkness. Hallucinations clouded my reality, and the logical recesses of my mind became hopelessly entangled in the woven horror. The echoed whispers led me to the cell of the patient I had read about, pouring into the abyss of my fear. The sight of the abandoned room, blanketed in decades-old unrest, triggered a horrific climax to my nightmarish adventure. When the storm finally receded, with terror finished tattooed on my mind, an unfamiliar courage propelled my staggering steps towards escape. Just as daylight emerged, promising salvation, an apparition blocked my path. Hypnotized by two hollow eyes staring back at me, a wave of pure terror washed over me, causing bile to rise up my throat. Snapping back to sanity, I bolted through the deserted halls, pursued by an unholy wail. I vowed to never set foot in this forsaken place again. Today, I'm plagued by the haunting relics of my bravado. Nightmares with faceless ghouls, eerie whispers, and inescapable halls torment my sleep. Daytime brings no reprieve, as visions of the asylum relentlessly invade my peace. My rendezvous with the asylum has scarred me, left me teetering on the edge of sanity. The echoes from those forgotten halls now resonate in my life, leaving behind an insatiable unease that reverberates with unnerving frequency. The asylum may be forgotten by the world, but its haunting tales are now an inseparable part of my existence. Its ghastly specters are my constant companions, reminding me of the eternal echo of a horror left behind.
It was an oddity that seemed to spring from nowhere. Hidden with distinction amidst the howling woods, the old asylum lounged like a forgotten boat left to rot. Its rusty iron gate screeched alarming whispers of a forgotten realm as I pushed it open, my heart thudding against my chest. Trapezing within, I noted the somber ambiance that saturated the abandoned place. Faint echoes of distant laughter, cries, and whispers seemed to hang in the air, bouncing off the decaying walls whose paint had miserably surrendered to time. Broken furniture lay scattered while forsaken rooms, once sane sanctuaries, were now prisoner to heavy dust and sorry silence. My curiosity piqued, I began rifling through piles of dingy hospital records forsaken in a room teeming with musty paper smell. Revealing in faded ink were the asylum's disturbing history and terrifying tales of inhumane medical practices. The place had once revolved around the whims of a doctor with a sadistic streak, whose notoriety in conducting unlicensed, brutal experiments was well recorded. His reign of cruelty was abruptly halted when the asylum's horror story ended in a chaotic mass outbreak. The patients, it seems, had one day vanished, leaving an echoing emptiness that had intensified over the years. The asylum, however, was far from lifeless. Soon I began to notice odd occurrences. Echoes of hushed whispering trailed my lone footsteps, and shadows appeared to crawl about freely. Inanimate objects, untouched for decades, seemed to maneuver defying explanation. Disturbing dreams began to infest my sleeping hours, their vivid, somber scenes mirroring the empty rooms I explored each day. Waking up, I could swear I heard cries for help, whispering through the stale air rumors of tortured souls trapped within these forsaken walls. One night, while navigating the eerie darkness, mirage-like figures began to manifest. Initially, distant specters dancing in shadows, they soon solidified into mutilated apparitions, mirroring the tormented silhouettes of former patients. As days turned to weeks, their presence grew more intense, inflicting psychological fear. The worst was yet to come. I crossed paths with the truly terrifying, the malevolent spirit of the sadistic doctor. Still maintaining his reign over the forsaken floors, his shadowy figure amplified the asylum's chilling ambiance. Fear had me by its claws, yet a steadfast resolve propelled me to persist. The truth lurking in the shadows begged unearthing, and the trapped souls screamed for salvation. Driven by a potent mix of terror, pity, and resolve, I stepped into the lair of horrors, the former doctor's office. Here, among piles of horrific artifacts and bloody instruments, I discovered the doctor's journals. Unraveling an even darker truth about the grotesque experiments, they thrust deep despair into my already trembling heart. Guided by the ghastly echoes of the tortured souls, and armed with the doctor's notes, I initiated a symbolic release of the spirits. It was akin to stepping into a bitter wave, trying to rid it of its chill. Yet I persevered. With a climactic standoff against the doctor's cruel spirit, I managed to wrest control. A deafening silence claimed the asylum as the tormented souls attained their long-awaited peace. Thoroughly shaken and indelibly scarred, I left the asylum, sealing its haunted doors and its horrifying past along with it. The dense wood seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as I ventured out, leaving the terrifying tale of cruelty behind me. Now, as I look back, I can't help but reflect on the devastating effects of inhumane atrocities. It had taken me a tremendous amount of courage to confront the horrifying past and set things right. It's a grim reminder of the dire consequences of unchecked power, the terrifying toll it demands, and the ripple it creates through lifetimes echoes that haunt forgotten minds. One morning, I found it. An unmarked envelope tucked between my bills. No return address, no name, just a date, time, and an unusual location. A mental institution sadly known as the Lonely Asylum, abandoned since the late 50s. Along with this odd invitation were old black and white photographs of a dilapidated building cascaded in mystery and decay. Staring at these haunting images, anxiety crawled up my spine only to compete with my growing curiosity. Despite knowing the safe decision would be to avoid the place entirely, intrigue got the best of me. The anonymous nature of the communication had me hooked. I decided to take the bait. The next day, suppressed fear in my heart, I drove down toward the fabled institution. The sudden shift of atmosphere from my mundane town to the chilling visage of the asylum was deceptively alarming. The derelict asylum loomed ominously, its age-old story yearning to be told. The structure was ravaged by time. The burying ivy creeper seemed to have feasted on the decaying exterior. The place was lifeless, except for the disturbing silence which almost felt like a sentient being. The institution was lost to time, and with it, countless stories of despair. On swallowing hard, I steeled myself and entered through the decrepit gate. What unraveled was a series of long, dark corridors echoing the lament of old times, rooms cloaked in dust and despair. Broken windows, cracked walls capture the essence of a forsaken place. The further I ventured, the more it was unveiled. Stumbling upon a weather-beaten file cabinet, I discovered records bound by moldy threads and yellowing journals documenting petrifying treatments and inexplicable patient experiences. The disturbing depths to which human sanity was tested shook me to the core. A sound cut through the crippling silence, a blood-curdling scream that resonated across the echoing hallways. I froze, battling the primal fear surging within me and the intensifying curiosity brewing alongside. Exploring room after room, I uncovered remnants of history best left untouched. Scratched-out graffiti filled with pleas for mercy, personal belongings encompassed in layers of dust, faded crayon drawings, and dolls with hollow eyes. An uncomfortable chill came over me, tingling every nerve, along with sporadic flickering of lights, cold drafts that whispered by, and unexplained noises. Then, a flicker, shadowy figures lurked around the corner of my vision. My heart pounded in my chest, yet I mustered the courage to push forward. With every step, the whispers grew louder, an array of disturbing sounds beckoning me to follow. Tempted by the eerie whisperings, I ventured into the darker recesses of the institution. Just as I was getting accustomed to the weft and warp of this eccentric place, there was a sudden power outage. Darkness took over, and my fear burgeoned. Then, the chase began. The chilling sensation of being pursued, the slam of unseen doors, the desperate twists of corroded doorknobs. Dread and adrenaline fueled me, urging me to run away from the abyss. I burst through the heavy entrance door. The outside world welcomed me with ominous shadows and overwhelming fear. Hasting down the weed-infested institution path, I sprinted towards my car, fumbling with my keys in a desperate bid to escape. The morning sun had begun its ascent when I reached my haven. Stepping on the accelerator, I left the haunted institute and the night of terror behind. Or so I thought. Upon reaching home, exhausted and rattled, I noticed a piece of ancient cloth from the institution clinging to my shirt. The grim stains on it transported me back to the chilling echoes of the abandoned asylum. Later that night, in the confines of my home, the whispers returned, sending a shiver down my spine. I couldn't help but wonder if my escapade had awakened something. Even under the protection of familiar walls, I felt vulnerable, unable to escape the unnerving fear that whatever resided in the lonely asylum had not let me go. I understood then that I was forever marked by the nightmarish whispers of that forsaken place.